Hello, this is James St. James, and in this episode we're going to be talking about the three relationships between the six elements. Let's learn about the functional anatomy of the human body from a healer perspective so that we can reverse engineer intuitive healing so that we can re-engineer body and mind to think and perform how we want. In this episode, we're going to be covering the different ways that the six elements react with each other within the human body. Right off the bat, I need to share with you that if you haven't seen the previous 3 episodes, that this video will probably confuse the heck out of you. So check the links below so that you can catch up before watching this episode. With that said, I'm assuming you are familiar with the 3 main functional aspects of the body, the electrical, the chemical, and the mechanical, and the 6 elements, earth, water, fire, air, light, and dark. In reality, all 3 aspects are happening simultaneously and all 6 elements are always present as well. They all coordinate with each other in specific ways depending which elements we consider. These interactions can be analyzed and summarized into 3 basic types of relationships that we can use to further build our 6-element model of how the human body works. Understanding these relationships will enable you to better trace where the root issues are in the body so that you can create solutions that will permanently fix the health issues that you're dealing with. First, the 3 main relationships that I'm going to cover exist independently for each of the 3 aspects that we use to analyze the body. These 3 relationships can help us understand each aspect of the body, with each aspect having unique patterns of expression. The first type of relationship between the 6 elements is nurturing or support. This is when one organ, line of the body, or electrical channel can help heal or support another organ, mechanical line, or electrical channel. There is no specific pattern of elements that nurture other elements, as it depends on which aspect of the associated body parts we are considering. For example, the water element nurtures the dark element, but only when looking at it from an electrical point of view. The second type of relationship between the 6 elements is invigoration. This is when one organ, sinew channel, or electrical channel gives energy to another organ, sinew channel, or electrical channel, respectively. However, giving energy isn't always a good thing, as giving too much energy can also damage the other element if its structural or chemical integrity is not sufficient. The third type of relationship between the 6 elements is balancing. The way that we can see balancing of the elements is 1. The balance between the elements on opposite sides of the octahedral model, and 2. The polarity balance between the positive and negative aspects within a single element. Now let's talk about how the opposite elements work in the 6-element model. If one element goes up, then the opposite will go down, and vice versa. Let's call this the rule of opposites. This might be a bit confusing, so let me give you an example. Let's take the effects of THC tetrahydrocannabinol, the key psychoactive component in cannabis, as an example. Consuming THC will hyperstimulate the positive functionality of the liver, which is the fire-negative organ. This will produce a positive charge. This, in turn, will create a negative charge on the opposite, which is the earth-negative organ, or the spleen. Because we went from fire-negative, now we go across the octahedral model from fire to earth, which now we're in the earth-negative organ, the spleen. This results in the spleen being instructed to nourish itself, as the function of negative charge is nourishment. This will make the spleen's positive functions, such as critical thinking and awareness, difficult or not as likely on a psychological level. Now within the earth element, let's go to the opposite polarity from negative to positive, because as you will see in this example, that this rule of opposites still remains true. The opposite of the spleen, which is the earth negative organ, is the earth positive organ, which is the stomach, which gets a positive charge. This will cause the stomach to perform its positive function, which is digestion, and its positive emotion, which is care. This is why cannabis is usually associated with non-aggressive behavior and the feeling of having the munchies. So hopefully this single example of balancing between organs gives clarity to what I mean by the word balance, and maybe you can start to see how the activity of one element affects the activity of the other elements. So the three relationships again are nurturing, invigoration, and balancing. Another way that I express these three relationships are negative, positive, and flow. In traditional Chinese medicine, they are referred to as yin, yang, and qi. A negative charge will lead to nurturing, a positive charge will lead to invigorating, and increased flow will lead to some kind of balancing relationship, as there's only so much flow in the human body at any given time, so trade-offs occur. Also, free giveaway of a $100 NutriPure product to the first person to write in a comment what organ is responsible for generating the total flow. Each person only gets one shot. These three energies are mainly controlled by the following three pathways: the vagus nerve, the spinal nerves, and the electrostimulation of the fascial matrix in that order. This means that the vagus nerve is associated with the regenerative aspects of each organ. This is the meaning of negative charge. Next, the spinal nerves regulate the organs so that they perform their duties and produce the respective electrical and emotional outputs. This is positive charge. Finally, the fascia around the organs is the intersection between the neuronal junctions and the tissues of the organs, which governs overall flow for both the negative and positive nerves. This is described as flow. Let me say this again in a different way, as I want to make sure this is clear. If the vagus flow to that organ is enhanced, the organ will experience more negative charge, or what we can call nurturing energy. If the spinal nerve flow to an organ is increased, the organ's positive charge will increase and it will begin to perform its metabolic functions better. If the flow of electricity in the extracellular matrix around the organ is increased, it will experience improved total physiological or electrical output, or qi, as it's referred to in traditional Chinese medicine. If we wanted to draw a parallel, in an automotive engine, for example, the negative charge would be like a cooling system in oil, the positive charge would be the fuel injection in the ignition, and the flow would be like the combustion of the engine, as these are all three things that determine the overall performance of the engine. If you increase the engine's fuel, for example, then the combustion will become stronger, and the engine will heat up, which will require more cooling to keep the material from warping and being damaged. It will also produce more exhaust. From there, if we wanted, we can start to see how we can draw relationships between each of the main aspects of the engine system. In this same way, we can draw relationships between the electrical channels, the organs, and the mechanical pathways, so that when we create an alteration to a component of one element, we will be able to predict how the other elements will respond. Because the human body is constructed with so many checks and balances, we always have to approach problems indirectly to solve them. There are many complex, interconnected mechanisms at play, and if you try to go straight for where you think the problem is without understanding the patterns between the elements, you might end up either wasting your time or hurting yourself. So these three relationships are important to understanding the fundamental construction of the body so that we can effectively create strategies to solve underlying health issues. I don't have time in this episode to go over each of the relationships between the various elements, but we will spend a whole season covering them more in depth. So for the purpose of this video, let's briefly take a look at three diagrams to understand these relationships within the electrical, the chemical, and the mechanical aspects so that you can get a clear mental picture of what I'm talking about. Here are the relationships for the electrical. Here are the relationships for the chemical. Here are the relationships for the mechanical. These three major relationships tend to be unidirectional between any two organs or elements. There are also relationships that cross over from one aspect to another that I haven't really quite fully discovered. So this will add a secondary level of complexity to these relationships, but with three relationships for three aspects for every one of the 6 elements, each having both a negative and positive polarity, we will have plenty of information to create healing strategies. Now that you understand the 3 aspects of the human body, the 6 elements, and how they relate to one another, we'll start talking about stress and the condition of the human body in the next episode, so that we can identify the root problems, where the damage is located, and start looking at solutions for those problems. If you want to learn more about the body and mind, then feel free to check out the other videos in this channel or subscribe. And if you have a question about anything, then drop it in the comments and I'll do my best to answer it. I'll see you in the next video.